Hi, and welcome to your lecture on goals, motivation, and habits, or you could otherwise title it as lifestyle management as a broad term. And this lecture is going to tie in quite nicely and lead you into your first assignment, which I'll provide details on a bit later, and you'll see that posted with a supplementary video explaining that as well. Uh, but yeah, I think this is a very timely thing to put this in a bit of context. It is about mid January now, or getting towards the end of January. And what's interesting around this time of year is most people have already given up on their New Year's resolution. So, as of the second Friday of every January, which is was last Friday, uh, on average, most people have already given up. And I think that's kind of interesting, especially when we're talking about goals, motivation, and habits. Like personally, I've just never really done New Year's resolutions typically. I've definitely engaged in goal setting though, and I usually did that, started when I was in undergrad, so that'd coincide with each semester. So about 3 times a year, I'd plan for the next 4 months or 3 months or so, depending again how everything aligned as far as the semesters I was in, and so that was kind of my history as far as goal setting, and that worked well for me. It was a bit smaller increments throughout the year, and I had a bit more short-term focus versus say something that happened at New Year's and broadly say for this entire year I want to exercise more or whatever the case is for different people. So I think what's again timely about this lecture and this content is the fact that it is New Year's, but also I think it's crucial to be able to help people set goals, motivate them, and help them develop good, healthy habits to ensure that they engage in a lifelong journey and path in wellness and bettering their health and wellness. And again, this can relate to any field that a lot of you are probably looking to get into, whether it's physiotherapy, kinesiology, or even teaching, or any other field related to movement and movement practitioners. We always have clients and people generally struggle with this. I think if we reflect on our own personal experiences, that probably resounds true for some of us more strongly maybe than others. But I think we've all had moments where we were hoping or had intention on achieving something and haven't been able to. So again, I hope both professionally, maybe academically in your later professions, as well as personally and for your own life and people you're helping, that this really is a helpful and interesting lecture. Our path that we're going to be taking today, and again, I'm going to try to break this up into a few different videos, so it'll be a little bit of like a mini lecture series, I guess. We're going to start off with a bit of an introduction to just a general approach and mindset to lifestyle management. And then we'll cover the stages of change and what that looks like and that kind of framework that we can operate from. We'll get into a second component where we're going to talk about motivation and a few interesting models that really helps us understand that concept a little bit more. And that leads nicely into our discussion on goal setting and goals. After that, we're going to have another video, and I think that will probably be wholly dedicated to habits, and we'll explore what habits are and why they're really useful. In particular, when a number of strategies that we can apply when we're trying to change our behavior and our actions. And ultimately, all of this, the main goal, again, is to get people and get ourselves engaged in a lifelong attitude and approach of essentially engaging in trying to manage and improve our wellness and well-being. Okay. Great. So, again, just to give a bit of a start and overview and approach to lifestyle management, a reminder when we're talking about wellness, we're talking about a continued practice. Okay. When we say health, we're really focusing on a state, a current, snapshot state of where we're at, typically along the physical, mental realms, but again, it's more of a snapshot. When we approach wellness and speak about wellness, we're really talking about just this like ongoing, continuous process. Okay, so in order to manage that and manage things that we can control, that's kind of the second part of wellness is we can take actionable decisions and choices and actions to be able to improve our wellness in any of the 9 dimensions that we spoke about last lecture. Okay, and oftentimes people, it's good to reflect on this yourself, but people will approach an idea and an area of their wellness or health and want to make a change there, right? And so the best place to start, always examine your current state of where you're at for any dimension of wellness or health. It's really hard to set a goal of where you want to get to and make sure there's some nuances that are correct, such as like it's attainable. And you can't do that if you don't know where you're starting. It's hard to figure out where that next step is. Once you have a good assessment of that, and there's an evaluation kind of exercise that's posted on a PDF in the folder for you to do. So it's lab 1.2 on the PDF. It's going to help you kind of evaluate on a bunch of different metrics, different areas of health. And once you complete that, you should have an idea of maybe where a good place would be to start. Sometimes we're not always aware of where to start. So we choose our target behavior. And the next step is to learn about it. So what exactly do I need to know about, let's say, smoking or vaping, and what are the nuances about that? How does it really affect my health? What can I expect in the future, etc. And maybe even looking into programs or support networks that are out there to be able to help stop smoking or vaping. For example, where we're located in British Columbia, Canada, our province has a program that you can go to any pharmacy and you can get free nicotine patches. So essentially they couple it with an educational program as well as far as how to stop. But again, if you didn't take time to learn about this behavior and or the behavior that you engage in and around this action, such as smoking, or programs that are out there, you just wouldn't know. So that's an important step. And we'll talk about how to critically look at different information just in a moment. Once you have gathered your information, that's when you can kind of start making a plan. And oftentimes, it's probably a last point in time where, I shouldn't say last point, but oftentimes people get stuck here and will often seek help at this point in time. They have some information, they have some knowledge, they just don't know what the next step is. So they'll seek a professional to help them out. Occasionally before people are even trying to learn about this health behavior and seeking themselves, they might seek help. But I think this is a really important step to kind of note. Oftentimes, this is a huge, huge step. If we think about our own selves and our egos, and I mean that in kind of like a psychological fact. So the way we want to protect our thoughts of ourselves is very scary and hard to say we don't know something. We have some sort of lack of information, some knowledge, and to put ourselves out there and to ask for help for, I'd say, a lot of people is really challenging. The interesting thing always on that point is if you're ever asked for help, most people are very willing to provide that help if asked. So it's really interesting that when we go to ask for help, a lot of people struggle with that. And so it is tough, and that's always a really big step for a lot of people in their health and wellness journey. Okay, I think the last points to consider is being able to engage in a lifetime journey of wellness really does require some persistence and consistency. Uh, I think without those two things, and there's lots of stuff in the health and fitness industry that is really put out there as far as like always needing willpower and always needing motivation. And I think those points are kind of misleading at times. Real key to, again, not just having like a temporary moment where you're working on a short-term goal, let's say, but to really engage in a lifelong kind of journey as far as wellness really does require this persistence and consistency as far as your actions and engagement in wellness. So let's, just for a moment before we kind of move forward into other topics, we're going to go back and touch on learning about target behaviors. So obviously being here listening to this lecture is one form that you can do that, but another is actually going, let's say, on the internet. That's where we get most of our information today, or some sort of other let's even say media outlets that are out there, and obtaining health information. Now the key to this is really approaching everything critically, right? And if you are first starting out and you know absolutely nothing about a certain health topic, because of the amount of information out there, it can be really, really hard to know where to start and really easy to be misled. So let's try to give you a little bit of like base kind of level of being able to approach information and approach it a little bit critically. I think fortunately now many of us have a bit more of a base understanding of how to be critical about information on the internet, just because it's so prevalent nowadays. But again, it's still good, and when it's something as important as your health and wellness, it's good to cover. So some general strategies if you notice some information presented on a website. First thing is, if it has some sort of a citation or linking of where they got that information from, that's a really great step. So just in and of itself, seeing that is really, really a good indication. That's a good place to start. If there's no links to any citations or sources of information, you can already be a little hesitant, a little more skeptical than you might be previously. Because the nice thing about that is once you follow those links, you can go back to see where that information was originally from. And sometimes you do a little bit of a rabbit hole, 2 or 3 links to get to an original source. But luckily, a lot of places will link you directly to the source that they got the information from. And that's good for you because you can see the fact that was cited by this particular source and go to the original, and usually there's a summary of information if they're citing from a peer-reviewed piece of literature or a study. And you can look over a summary at the start, which is called an abstract, and you can go through that content and see if the point that was made actually was stated by the researchers in this particular study. Okay, and I guess that'd be the other thing that I didn't quite bring up yet, but anytime that you're looking at a piece of scientific literature, that's also very helpful and usually more credible source than other places. And the reason for that is science has this peer-reviewed process where it's not just one person. There's many, many steps that have to go in to ensure that this research was done well. And it's a bit of a lengthy process, which is times kind of makes science in some areas a little bit cumbersome, but there's good reason for that because there's so many checkpoints relative to, say, just opinion or one person just stating things on the web, right? Okay. A couple other points, or one other way that you can find this information or double check is, well, to just do that, right? So you found one piece of research. It's like, hey, looks good. What about another piece of peer-reviewed research? Does that also support the same idea? And so that's interesting because sometimes you'll find research that conflicts each other. And that's fine. It just means in different situations, this idea to do with health and wellness works sometimes and not other times. And that's an important piece of information to know, just as much as it doesn't work totally, or it works all, like most often relative to the research. Okay. Occasionally, though, that's not helpful, and I think if we were to go into the fitness industry, and again, I'm not slagging on it. I think there's a lot of very well-intentioned people out there, but oftentimes the fitness industry can be a bit of an echo chamber, which what I mean by that is one idea gets put out into the fitness industry, and again, anecdotally or for one person based off of their experience, might have worked, and then it just kind of gets prevalent out throughout the fitness industry. And all of a sudden, because so many people have bought into this idea or this concept or fad, it kind of gets baked into common knowledge in the fitness industry. And so that's where a lot of critical thought, and again, going back to original sources, what does the research really say? Is it quality research, which takes some time to develop as a skill, is really important to do, and especially with new fads, for sure. Okay. Good. So when you're coming across information on the web as well, you want to watch for misleading language. One of the key, easiest things to kind of identify if maybe there's some misleading language, or if that source is maybe not great, and I'm going to tie a couple of points together, is if it's claiming fast results. So oftentimes for health and wellness, if people are guaranteeing instant results or fast results, that's like an immediate kind of pump the brakes, take a moment and pause. Because there really is no such process for a lot of people's goals, such as changing behaviors and patterns that are instilled in each of us that are relatively permanent. Okay, it takes a lot of, as we'll see, kind of effort and steps and time in order to get meaningful results. Okay? Similarly, if a product or service is being sold, that's a really good point in time to just be misleading. Usually, I'm saying these 2 points together because they typically go together. And again, go back to research and remember that anecdotes or people's stories aren't research or peer reviewed or haven't gone through a rigorous process to be able to make the claims they do. Anyone can have an opinion, right? So, keeping that in mind. So the one nice thing is if it's a peer-reviewed study or comes from some sort of public health authority, generally there's been enough rigor and effort and time and checkpoints before that information gets disseminated. And so those are usually trustworthy sources for sure. Okay. And then the last kind of point that I wanted to make to all of this is, regardless of the information you come across, 2 things. One, it really needs to work for you and be choices that fit and align and are right for you. And that can also tie into making sure that you consult with your physician or doctor or a appropriate healthcare provider based off of what your goal is. Okay. So there's more information there than maybe anticipated, but definitely I think it's important to pause and evaluate where your source of information is coming from when you're starting to do your initial research into changing something for your health and wellness. Okay, so this is great. We've kind of in our minds, we've decided that there's this thing maybe that we want to change, or there's kind of wellness that we want to improve on. There's some sort of information we need to get, and this is like good, just kind of general starting points. But I think a good question and a place to kind of frame both evaluating where we're at in our place and journey of change, or where people we're working with might be as far as their points of change, would be looking at different stages of change. Okay, so how do we identify where someone might be in this process? Allows us as movement practitioners, whether it's kinesiology, physio, occupational therapy, physiatry, whatever it happens to be, or teaching and stuff, where might our clients or our patients be where we can make our best chance of intervention to help them out the greatest. Okay, and to do that, we have and do like to use this model of stages of change. So the whole model is that's been researched and kind of developed by Prochaska and DeClement was the trans-theoretical model. Most people call it the six stages of change. And again, this really helps practitioners, I find, but also ourselves reflect on where are we in our change journey. Okay. So we might notice I have 6 panels here for the 6 stages and some blue arrows that kind of put us in a specific order. Okay, the model itself isn't cyclic, so it's not a cycle, and so that's the order that we see here. Okay, so what's interesting and what I kind of appreciate about this model is that it starts off at pre-contemplation. And so when someone's at pre-contemplation, it means they don't think they have a problem. They have no intention to change the behavior. It's like the blinders are on. There's just no awareness and no innate desire for any type of change. And I think I might use a friend's dad that I know who classically just had a bit of a bum shoulder, didn't believe in stretching, like not required. He's like a golfer, could still play golf. There's no pain, nothing bothered him that way. So why include stretching if there's no issue? So again, this is kind of like pre-contemplation, before even considering that maybe there's change that's needed. Okay. Next step, or closer to change that people get, is something called the contemplation stage. Now here, people know they have a problem, so something's come up, and they intend like maybe in the near future, and so the specific timeline with this model is 6 months. So sometime within the next 6 months, so half a year, they think, okay, yes, maybe I'll initiate this change, maybe I'll do something. Which I love that stage. I think that's maybe one that's a little bit more foreign to myself personally in my journey. Usually from pre-contemplation, I don't want to say skip over this, but I definitely wouldn't plan to do something in 6 months. For myself, once I kind of identify that there's a problem, I usually get on fixing it kind of as quickly as possible. But again, some people, maybe based off of their life and what's going on, say, okay, within the next 6 months, I'm going to make a change. So once they've had this like contemplation period, they start moving into what's called preparation. Now, preparation is kind of a blended point. And I say that because people at this point in time they might be actively planning, but they might also be doing things that are changing their behavior. And I've always found it interesting on this model how they separate the two. To me, myself, my process is typically very much so planning as a first step. So to me, when I get clients to start planning out what their goals are and what their weeks are going to look like, etc., for achieving their goal, that is a step, that is an action as far as I'm concerned. But again, they kind of differentiate the two here. I think they're speaking more specifically to if you observe any little changes in behavior. Again, just having awareness of something will innately make us change things. So things might have started, or like very near future, within the month, we'll take action. And I think to kind of go back to the example of my friend's dad, again, was playing golf, and at a point in time, I noticed that he wasn't able to necessarily lift his arm up over a certain point into abduction. So again, it didn't really bother his game of golf, so he didn't really do much. So this might have been like a contemplation stage. But he's like, something's a little funny there, but I can still golf fine for most of my drives. It's just an occasional one, maybe that my shoulder hurts. Maybe within a month, I'll go see physio or something, or maybe saw physio once but didn't really follow through on many of the exercises and stuff like that. So again, that would be kind of floating between contemplation and preparation. Okay, so some small changes might have started this notion that something very soon should be done. We're at preparation stage. Okay. Next up, this is the big show. This is the big action stage. Okay, this is where it all starts to come together. So we've had our planning, we've had our few initial maybe like preparatory sort of steps as far as like booking the physio appointment or at least going and gaining some information from that session and a couple of things you can do. Action is doing the homework from physio. The action is outwardly changing your actions and behaviors in order to create change. Okay, and yeah, I think that's kind of key. I think the other thing to consider too is you can also modify your environment in order to make obtaining your action or behavior, whatever your goal happens to be, you can modify that to help you obtain your goal, and that's also considered action as far as this model. Okay, once we've started action, we've made changes, we're actively living these, I'll introduce the idea of habits or actions, then we get into this maintenance phase. So maintenance is when we've been doing this for 6 months. Okay, so again, about half year. Okay, so if you've only been doing your goal for a week or a month, that's great, that's superb, that's a good chain of success, and again, should keep rolling with that. But until you hit about 6 months, we don't really consider that maintenance. Okay, and until that point in time, we're still acting depending on the what the activity is, if it's complex or simple. A more complex behavioral change definitely takes longer. So again, at least 6 months is kind of an average for maintenance phase. And then eventually, after we've had this for quite a while, a timeline I don't know if the model specifically says, but I would say about a year. Once you've gotten to that phase where you've had maintenance for a while, then you enter into what's called termination. Now, termination, I don't think is a great term, and I'll explore a couple other ones a little bit later on. But you've exited this cycle of change, so you've had maintenance long enough where we just have this behavior ingrained in ourselves to the point where we don't feel tempted to go back to our old behaviors. And, I said a year, but really most research has shown that it depends on the complexity of the habit or complexity of the behavior you're trying to change. Again, I think on the upper end, you're talking about 2/3 to a year for a more complex behavior to do it regularly, let's say pretty much on a daily level, in order to reach this kind of termination phase where things are automated. Okay. Now, at this point in time, I think what's interesting to note, and again, this isn't part of the original model, but I think it's important to note if you're trying to consider how to engage in wellness throughout your lifespan, is once we reach termination of one specific skill, we then get into back at the start either not knowing about where else to change in our behavior, or we can kind of skip ahead to contemplation. So again, as we're wrapping up maybe one certain skill, it's probably already happened that we've thought of and considered other areas of wellness that we can engage in to improve. And then occasionally, what I've seen actually with like quite a few clients of mine is even before they get to termination, although definitely at that point in time, we see that they're already actively engaging in preparing to improve another area of health. So their preparation, they've already like, okay, what's the next thing? What can I improve on? And they've probably already started engaging in other healthy habits to help support their wellness. So one specific example about that would be a client that's come in just wanting to improve exercise and get more consistent with that. They'll already, while engaging in that, start looking at how to improve their nutrition. So even without necessarily really settling into a pre-contemplate or kind of like a whole new cycle. They just recognize quite quickly that nutrition might be an issue, so they skip ahead to nutrition contemplation and right into preparation because they've already kind of gone through this in another area or metric in their life. And so I find, again, this process is really much a bit of like a snowball process. Oftentimes, again, depending on the person, I'd say more type A people, once they kind of get going on one, I actually have to slow down and stop a lot of people to just focus on one thing at a time. People are very quick to want to move forward with a lot of different avenues in their life. Especially once they get into this mode where like, okay, so I'm exercising now. Okay, now I need my nutrition. Okay, now I need to go get my health checked out. Okay, now I need to also learn a language, and I need to. So there's this avalanche effect for some individuals versus a bit of a snowballing effect. And as a healthcare provider, it's really good to kind of help keep people focused on their specific goal until they reach a point of at least maintenance, if not termination, before shifting your focus on to another goal. Again, I feel like going to a bit of a preparation phase, for some healthy supportive habits for their main goal is fine. So depending on your client, they can probably handle that. Okay, and so that's the stages of change, and kind of our new version of what people typically go through, kind of expanded into a cycle versus just a stepwise model. Okay, great. Next up, we're going to be chatting about motivation and what part within, say, this model or just our general change of behavior approach that takes, as well as getting into some goal setting. Okay, all right, catch you on the next video.